You've been told hormones like testosterone are the secret to muscle growth. Here's the truth: most fitness influencers won't say. For natural lifters, those hormonal spikes of the workout, they don't matter nearly as much as you think. Today we'll break down why training-induced hormone boosts are overrated, what actually drives hypertrophy, and how to stop wasting time chasing biological ghosts. Let's begin with a common myth. Full body training leads to more muscle growth because of increased anabolic hormone levels. The logic goes like this: if you train large muscle groups like your legs, you trigger a hormonal response. And this response is supposed to enhance growth in smaller muscles trained in the same session, like your arms. This is often referred to as the spillover effect. But here's the problem. There's no solid evidence that these short-term hormonal shifts actually lead to meaningful muscle growth in distant muscle groups. A Swiss scientist and exercise physiologist known for his detailed reviews on muscle hypertrophy has challenged this idea directly. He argues that the whole body versus split training debate shouldn't be based on hormonal responses at all, but on training goals, total volume, and recovery capacity. In other words, the traditional advice full body training is for beginners, splits are for advanced lifters, isn't supported by science whatsoever. Instead, you should choose your training style based on lifestyle and goals, and not experience levels. Full body training is time efficient, helps you train muscle groups more frequently, and works well for people who train 2 to 4 times a week. Splits can allow more volume, muscle group per session, and they're great if you enjoy being in the gym 5 to 6 times a week. But neither method has a hormonal advantages. Now let's look at what anabolic hormones actually are. We're talking about molecules like testosterone, growth hormone IGF-1 and insulin. These can act in 2 ways: endocrine, traveling through the bloodstream to distant tissues, or paracrine, affecting only nearby cells. And here's a lesser known fact: muscle cells themselves can release hormone-like substances like myokines, which play a localized role in adaptation and growth. These aren't broadcast systems wide. They're more like private messages between neighboring cells. So even if a squat session does increase testosterone or growth hormones levels slightly, the mechanism of action is mostly local. There's no known pathway where the transient increase in circulating testosterone from training legs directly causes your biceps to grow more than if you trained them alone. And this brings us to an even bigger misconception: the overestimation of an acute hormone spikes. A lot of people believe that the small increase in testosterone after intense training is enough to stimulate systemic muscle growth, but that's based on confusing correlation with causation. Let's go back to puberty for a second. During adolescence, when testosterone levels naturally surge, muscle mass increases rapidly. That correlation is clear, but many people falsely extend this logic to adults. If I can spike my testosterone through training, I'll get the same effect. In reality, it doesn't work that way. In adults, the body is already hormonally stable. Training can cause small short-term increase in anabolic hormones, but these don't compare to what happens with external substances like steroids. Your natural spikes are brief, peaking and returning to baseline within 30 to 60 minutes, and are often lower than your normal morning levels. In contrast, studies on exogenous testosterone, meaning testosterone introduced from outside the body, paint a very different picture. One landmark study had men receive 600 mg of testosterone per week for 10 weeks. Without any training at all, participants saw a significant increase in muscle mass, up to 14% growth in quadriceps volume. That's because testosterone overrides your body's natural hormonal limits and maintains elevated levels for weeks, not minutes. So, when fitness influencers tell you that squatting heavy will boost your testosterone and make your arms grow, you know what to say. Show me the study. Bottom line, don't chase hormones. Don't fall for the myth that full body training is superior or some imagined hormonal cascade. Choose your training structure based on your weekly schedule, recoverability, and personal preference. Now, how do natural and artificial hormones effects compare? And what should you focus on instead? So what happens with exogenous hormones like anabolic steroids? When you inject testosterone, say 600 mg per week, you're not causing a brief uptick. You're pushing blood testosterone levels far beyond physiological norms, and you're keeping them elevated continuously. That does cause measurable increase in muscle mass, even without training. The takeaway: training-induced hormone changes are not remotely comparable to doping. So when people say train legs to get big arms, What they're actually doing is confusing the map with the terrain. Just because a biological signal exists doesn't mean it has meaningful effect on muscle hypertrophy. Let's zoom out. What does matter for muscle growth? First, mechanical tension. When you challenge a muscle with enough load over time, you create micro damage and stimulate repair processes. This activates local pathways like mTOR that directly control protein synthesis. You need to train with enough intensity to recruit the larger type 2 fibers, the ones with the most growth potential. This happens not because of hormones, but because of effort. Third, training volume and consistency. Across dozens of studies, the strongest predictor of hypertrophy is total weekly volume, number of hard sets per muscle group, and the ability to recover and repeat. Hormones might be in the background, but they're not the levers you control. You don't lift to increase testosterone, you lift to create tension, fatigue, and adaptation. Even the time of hormone changes matters. Imagine hormones as the background music in a movie. They set the tone, but they don't write the script. The script, your training plan, your effort, nutrition, sleep, and consistency is what drives the actual outcome. You wouldn't try to change the plot of a film by adjusting the soundtrack, right? So stop trying to change your physique by obsessing over minor hormonal shifts. Here's the practical implication. Train for the signal, not the spike. Choose exercises and training splits based on your schedule and ability to recover, not on the belief that squatting will magically make your biceps grow. If you're training twice a week, full body is probably ideal. If you're training 5 times a week, a push-pull leg split might give you more flexibility. The system design should suit your constraints, something any engineer would appreciate. So let's wrap this up with a clear summary. Acute hormone spikes from training are real, but small, short-lived, and likely insignificant for natural lifters. The supposed hormone spillover effect, where training legs helps your arm grow, is not supported by controlled studies. True hypertrophy is driven by local muscle tension, fiber recruitment, and training volume, not circulating testosterone. And most importantly, if your training plan is built around chasing hormone spikes, you're optimizing the wrong variable. Instead, treat your body like a system. Manage stress, apply tension, recover well, and build momentum week by week. If you would like to know when cardio affects your muscle growth, check this video out right here. Thank you for watching. This was Dennis. Bye.